You know what? First things first. Welcome to CNN NN. I'm your host, Kirk Kennedy. Let's go in. On this channel, we take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. Expose them, expose them. Man, oh man. Wow. I tell you what, I don't know if it's me, but I feel like on some level, I feel like the world is in like it's Groundhog's Day, the sequel. I feel like in the media, at least in the political world, it feels like every day is the same day almost. It's Candace Owens, Trump and the Epstein files, ICE. And you get smatterings of other things here and there. Aisha Curry saying she doesn't like her marriage and this stuff, and it's really fascinating to watch conservatives attacking Candace Owens. Candace Owens, it's a wild time. I feel like it's Groundhog's Day. I feel like it's the same thing over and over. I literally feel like I could make the same video over and over again, which is partly why I haven't been making as many videos. Because it's like, man, I'm just going to be saying the same stuff over and over and over again. But you got to talk about what's being talked about, right? On one level. I mean, there's obviously things I could get into, but well, let's have a little fun. Let's have this conversation. Because I've been thinking about a lot of stuff, and you know me, I don't know if you're old enough to remember G.I. Joe, this cartoon in the 80s. They've always had like a moral of the story, right? And then they would always say this, and now you know, and knowing is half the battle, right? It's just kind of like this vibe. Well, this is, you know me, I'm going to say some things. There's going to be a moral to the story. But it's a wild time. It's a wild time to be a Christian. It's a wild time. All right, let's start where we have started the last couple of episodes. Let's start with Candace Conspiracy Owens. It is fascinating to me to watch this. Now, let me just say out the gate, and this may sound like weird for me to say this. This could sound crazy, what I'm about to say right now. I'm a Christian. I'm a pastor of a church, a rap artist, a Fabio impersonator by day. No, this is going to sound crazy what I'm about to say, all right? I honestly, in many levels, I don't care if Candace Owens is telling the truth or not. I don't, because I've never looked to Candace Owens for like understanding truth in life. I've just never thought of her that way. Now, I know a lot of people do. She's the number one podcast in the world. I've always respected her, though, even when she was wrong, for just being a dog to the bone, diligent, dogmatic. This is it, Candace Owens. And I think it's interesting. I'm watching all these people, podcasts, friends of mine, people just, she's loony, she's this, she's that. Quite frankly, like here's what I would say. And maybe I'm out of the loop here, right? To all the people that are saying Candace Owens is loony. Now, I could be wrong. So I'll say this. They're saying that, like right now, the latest thing is she's been saying that the French government is trying to kill her. Like there's like assassination attempts for her and so forth, right? Okay. All right. Here's what I would say to the people who are saying she's just making up the stuff. Like, what evidence are you presenting to the contrary? Like, how do you know what she's saying about Turning Point is not true? Because you agree with what someone else who disagrees with her says. Like, how do we know that these things that she's saying are not true? How do you know them? I don't know. And let me tell you why I said I think this is really strange for me. Here's why. Because this is how she's been the whole time. This is how Candace Owens has been the whole time. From when she was going after Black Lives Matter to now going after the Turning Point. It was the whole time, right? And it was like Candace Owens, this is why I respect her. She's keeping the same energy. And I respect consistency. I like consistency. She's keeping the same energy. What I think is interesting is watching my friends on the conservative side who are now attacking her from Ali Beth Stuckey's not my friend, but she's one. These different people coming after Candace Owens, but everybody had her back when she was talking about the left. And to be clear, there were stats and facts she was bringing up without any real evidence. The only thing that I felt like Candace Owens brought from the left was she proved that BLM were using funds to buy for personal gain. She proved that. She did a little, and she proved that they had a mansion, a $6 million mansion somewhere, and she went to the door, and I gave her credit for that little bit of investigative journalism. But for the most part, a lot of what she said when she kept the same energy attacking the left, and which I think she should have done that. There were some things that I think should have been attacked, but she attacked. I didn't see this same energy when she was going after Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. I didn't see the same energy from the conservatives. But now that she's attacking the conservatives, you got people who were presumably godly telling her to shut up. People who are presumably godly. And it's like, wait a minute. Oh, so like, and this is what, I feel like I'm making this, I feel like I'm Bill Murray in Groundhog's Day. I'm watching the same thing unfold. Does anyone, to my Christian conservative podcasters, YouTubers with bigger channels in mind, are you thinking eternally? Do you have a category for Ephesians 5, like God is exposing? Because I feel like all of the back and forth is you disagree with what she's saying because you don't like and I don't know. So now she's conspiracy theory, and I'm watching all these videos, and it's like, I don't follow her long, but Candace Owens seems like she's just as sane as she's always been to me. I don't think she's saying, I mean, she might make a statement this wild, but I thought she was making wild statements 8 years ago. And maybe it's me, right? I appreciate that she keeps the same energy. Is she right about all the things she's saying? I don't know. And I actually don't really care because I think there's a deeper issue here. I think the Lord is doing something deeper here. But let's move on. Let's move on to the next thing that's just like, I'm just going to hit these popular news cycle things, and then I'm going to come in with something else, right? Trump and the Epstein files. Like, what are we doing? This is where being a believer who doesn't have a political dog in the fight is good. And this is where I'm grateful to the Lord for exposing certain things. When Joe Biden was in office, there were so many calls from the conservative side to question his son. His son had a drug habit. His son did a deal with, like, I think some Arabs. There was a laptop about. All I heard about was Joe Biden's son when he took office. I mean, it was an attack on his son. Now, I can't remember what political connections and like if he were guilty of things, how would that affect Joe Biden? But I remember watching conservatives go after this. Oh, they're hiding this. It's a conspiracy. He took money to do this and all this stuff, right? I remembered watching all of this and wondering, like, I don't know what the big deal is. Okay, if his son has a drug habit, what is Joe Biden supposed to do with that, right? I just was watching this and I just thought it was crazy. But I had other concerns for the left and the Democrats and Joe Biden as president and Kamala Harris as vice president. I just thought it was wild that she was the first big name out of the race, and then they make her the vice president. There's so many things I just thought, man, this is so crazy, right? So I'm watching this. I'm watching them go after Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden's laptop was all the rage. I mean, you can go Google it, go use AI. It was all they talked about, right? So when Trump and them came into office, it was clear. It was all, hey, the Epstein files are about the Democrats, and this is it, and it's about Bill Clinton. Listen, at this point, who really cares what Bill Clinton did or didn't do? Who really cares about it? It was like, we're going to release the Epstein files. You had the Pam Bondi. Look, the files are on my desk. Cash Patel, like, we're going after it. And all of a sudden, there was a delay. 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 And now, the Lord is exposing the lies of the conservative side. Trump is bold-faced lying to his own folks. Guys from Joe Rogan on down are all like, they all sound like Malcolm X. We've been hoodwinked. We've been bamboozled. We've been run amok. We've been led astray. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us. Like, I'm watching this layout like, you have to be kidding me. And then the epitome for me. Now, let me just say this so you know this. As a Christian, I'm more conservative. Politically, I don't trust anybody. But as a Christian, I lean more conservative in terms of how I see the world. I watched Megyn Kelly say live, not AI. Watched her say it with this a Jewish Israeli woman. I forgot the name. Like, she's kind of popular in the news media. I watched Megyn Kelly, who has, if I'm not mistaken, a 14-year-old daughter, say that she has credible sources that Jeffrey Epstein didn't like young girls, but they were like barely legal, like 15 to 17 years old. And I watched the video. I made sure it was not doctored, it was AI, but I was shocked to see Megyn Kelly, who I watched attack the left for things, Hunter Biden, stuff that he's not even the president, say that, almost insinuating that the Jeffrey Epstein situation is being blown out of proportion by the left, as if like liking a girl that's 8 years old versus 15 is like, oh, okay. Well, in the biblical days, she said this on national television, or not national television, it was out there, and it was incredible. And as I watched that happen, I thought, among other things and among other times, wow, Lord, wow, you are showing us that the moral high ground, conservative right, is evil. Is evil. And the left, evil. You're just showing us that, like, remember when the rich young dude said, came up to Jesus and said, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus said, "Why do you call me good? Only God is good alone." Right? God is proving that only God is good. Alone. Alone. For Megyn Kelly to say that, even if she believed that to be true, I have a 14-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 17-year-old. I would be appalled if an older man or woman did something with them and it was like, well, they're barely legal. Like, what are we doing right now? Every conservative that watched that, and again, she's not a politician, but other people are saying similar things. This is about the left. This is about the Democrats. And it's not looking that way, fam. The emails that are coming out about what Trump is a relationship to them is just, it's fascinating. And he ran on, I'm going to release this, and then doesn't want to release all that. It is a nightmare that conservatives cannot wake up from. And I think, let me move on to the next thing and then I'll come back. The next thing, ICE. Have you guys seen video clips of what ICE is doing? I mean, ICE is on a rampage. Like, they're just on a rampage. Trying to get 3,000 arrests a day. They're on a rampage, ICE. Doing stuff that just seemingly is illegal. And I'm just curious, like, is how people are processing this. But I can only go by what I see. You judge a tree by the fruit that it bears, right? I'm watching this. I watched Caroline Levitt, White House press secretary. I've watched her make claims that when ICE detained a 15-year-old handicapped student, that it was just for the government to do that. And then today, either today or yesterday, news media reports that Caroline Levitt's relative, I think it's her nephew's mom, got arrested by ICE. And now I think there's a GoFundMe campaign to get this relative out. I don't think this story's AI. Could be. What is happening right now? What's happening? The left landslide victories in the most recent political polls. And you know that they're going to, the first chance they get, push hard, because what's happened now. And so there was a point where when you were a politician, you ran on bipartisanship. You ran on, I can work with both sides of the aisle. And people wanted that because it seemed like that phraseology seemed like it cared about the American people. That's the language they used. They always had their thumb up. We care about the American people. I can work with both sides of the aisle to get this done, to get America, all these things, right? That is gone. That is gone. Our political landscape and what we can, and I don't think we're going to back away from this. The political landscape right now, if you're a believer, let me give you one word that describes the political landscape right now, why you should be cautious. One word, political landscape, one word, vengeance. Vengeance. Say what you want, unfollow me, do whatever you got to do. As you can see, I don't even make as many videos. I won't be heartbroken. Trump is a vengeful man. He makes it clear. At Charlie Kirk's funeral, he said, I'm sorry, I don't forgive my opponents. He took what Charlie Kirk's wife said, I forgive you, the person who killed her husband. And he said, I don't forgive anyone. I don't forgive my enemies. He's a vengeful dude. I'm watching Christians become vengeful. You know, it's funny. As you see this play out, some people are deceived and thinking they're not being vengeful. They're just applying their politics, their faith through their politics. No, you're not. This is vengeance. He's a vengeful dude. What we're seeing happen is vengeance. And then the left is going to try to take vengeance against the right. And guess who's going to be stuck in the middle? All of us who just pressed buttons. We're just pressing the buttons, voting for people. And unless we're careful, we're going to follow the character of the people that we're associated with. That's what we'll follow. We're careful. We are going to follow the character of the people that we're associated with. Trump is a vengeful dude. He is a revenge dude, vengeful. God said, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. So far as it depends on you, Romans 12:18, live peaceably with all. I'm watching believers take vengeance, follow, agreeing with vengeance, associating with vengeance, dealing with this vengeance. It's incredible. These are professing Christians. Vengeance, all political categories. No praying for your enemies. No anything. Vengeance. This is the political landscape. The left is going to take vengeance against the right. And the people that put their hope in the left are going to stand behind it. And the people that are right, the MAGA party is split. I don't know if the Democratic Party is split the way that MAGA party is split. MAGA, Groypers, Nick Fuentes, straight up and down racists is rising up. Black conservatives are now saying there's racism in the conservative party when they said there was no racism when the left was saying it. What's happening here? If you focus on Candace, Trump, and ICE, you'll miss what God is doing. You'll miss it. And it's easy to miss it because we're overwhelmed and inundated with nothing but foolishness. And we're told, pick a side. Pick a side. Here's the reality. brothers and sisters, those of you who believe in Jesus. Here's the reality. And here's what we need to be careful of. I've said this before, but it bears repeating. Matthew 24:13, Jesus says this: because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold, but he who endures to the end will be saved. Jesus is saying that because people will be more aware of the sins of other people, they're going to be offended and they're going to start hating people. The love of many will grow cold. And he's talking about believers. Like Jesus, the Bible is not written to the world, not written to Christians about what the world does. It's written to Christians about what Christians should do. And the consequences in the Bible are not largely about what will happen to the unbeliever, because it's obvious. The consequences that are in the Bible are written to believers about what will happen to them if they walk away from not just the professed faith. Apostasy is not about saying, I'm no longer a Christian. You can walk away from the faith if you no longer submit to the character that God requires. That's the greater apostasy, actually, because it's not clear who you are. Right? You look at Matthew 4, that's the parable of the sower. And Jesus tells the gospel landed on 4 different groups of people. And the third group, he says that it grew up. It landed in thorns, went in and choked the word. And it said it grew up, thorns and thistles grew up with the seed, right? And Jesus he explained that to be, these are people who the love of money, the cares of this life, and the desires for other things have crept in and choked out the word, right? So Jesus is saying the love of money, the cares of this life, and the desires for other things are separate from what the word is supposed to do in a believer, right? Remember a couple years ago when Andrew Tate was the dude, the red pill movement, he was getting these young men to support him about how to have a lifestyle and money. And it was all, and he was talking about get the bag. I had guys in my church talking about, man, we got to get the bag. And I was like, to do what with? What are you going to do with the bag? I said, you talking about get the bag and you can't even afford groceries right now, fam. Get the grocery bag first, right? Get the diaper bag first, right? Let's do that, right? I had to help some dudes calm down. You see this, it's the love of money, the kid. Jesus is saying that is incompatible with the believer. And he said it grows up, and it chokes out the word, it grows up together. It's what we would call in the theological world syncretism. Brothers and sisters, if you think that what you're seeing happen among believers in the Christians, it's syncretism, where the cares of the politics, the wanting to defend it, and everyone thinks they're applying their faith. But like, the faith that we have is not about imposing any morality on the culture. It's about demonstrating holiness to this culture, right? It's not about forcing another side to accept what we think is best for them. You didn't see Jesus force anybody. He was like, look, from the Old Testament, choose this day whom you will serve. If you do not see what's happening right now, you will, some of you may be lost, not forever, but deceived, right? Do you know how many times the Bible, the New Testament, talks about do not be deceived? I think I did this at my church maybe a month or two ago. I want to say there's 15 or 16 warnings to Christians to not be deceived. You know what that means? Christians can be deceived. I think many believers are being deceived right now. They're being deceived. They're being deceived by the hypocrisy of the world, the inundation of the political realm. And I know some good Christians who are just like, what do I do? How do I fight? Like I'm drowning over here. I'm drowning. I got people hitting me. What do I say here? People are offended because I don't agree with this, and people are struggling. Real people who love the Lord. So let me offer a thought to encourage you as best as possible. I want to talk about methods of maturity. Let me tell you why many of us, and I failed in this way too. So I am indicting myself. I have failed in this, and the Lord is bringing me out of this and I'm very grateful. And I'm bringing my church out of this. Let me tell you why many Christians. Do you ever wonder why you hear a good sermon? It was convicting. It was good. You felt it. You cried afterwards. You prayed. You went up front to ask for prayer. You talked about it in your small group. You took notes. You were convicted. And then 3 weeks later, you're just back to, it's like you almost forgot that sermon, or you had some counsel. You met with your pastor or someone that's wise, and they said things and connected dots, and you thought, man, this was so good. And then within a month, you're not able to do it. You've just forgotten. It's a struggle. I know believers who will not say what I'm about to say with you with their mouth because they know better than to say this. But when I bring this up to them and they're honest, I know Christians who think that God is actually opposing their growth. Like that holiness is like unattainable. Like what God commands, like I'm praying, I'm memorizing, and nothing's happening. I'm not changing. And they just feel like, man, and so they just kind of give up. They don't walk away from the faith, but they just settle for being in the community and this community moralism. A lot of Christians are really struggling because they don't know, how do I do this? I'm drowning every time I turn around. I have to defend it. So let me talk about this concept of methods of maturity. The reason why, and I failed in this too, so I've been doubting myself. The reason why it's hard to grow as a Christian, one, this is very strategic of the enemy. We are the first generation of Christians that have the access to more information than anyone in the history of the world has ever had. Distraction is the devil's main scheme. We're just distracted. You start to pray, you get a notification, you check it real quick, boom. All these different things. We're just distracted. And what happens is we're trying to honor the Lord. I think we genuinely want to, but we don't have a method of maturity. Now, what is a method of maturity? What do I mean by that? In the Bible, there are plenty of methods of maturity. Many of us are more moral than holy in our obedience because we find tactics and techniques that are not really methods in the Bible. Let me give you an example, right? I probably said this before, but this is an obvious example. Let me explain what I mean by this. I know people, you struggle with pornography, right? You struggle with corn. You fall into it, right? You give into corn and pleasing yourself. You fall into it, right? You're convicted, right? And then you think, someone says, hey, look, man, you need to get covenant eyes on your phone, right? You get covenant eyes and you get accountability, right? And it works for a little bit of time, and then somehow you fall back into it. Whether it's you've somehow worked it on your phone or on your desktop, you fall back into it. And you think, you get upset, like, what's happening? Like, why am I feeling like I got this, I got that? Those things are helpful, but that's doing it in your own strength. God has provided for us multiple methods of maturity. And as we grow in our faith, we end up stacking them and having multiple methods. Let me explain what I mean by this. So Jesus gave the ultimate method of maturity when he said this. This is in a couple places in the Gospels. I'm going to quote it from Mark 8. Jesus says, if anyone would come after me, he must first deny himself, take up his cross, follow me. Right? This is Jesus talking. This is a straight up and down method of maturity. Deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me, right? So Jesus is saying this is what it means to get to heaven. Deny yourself, take up your cross, follow me. That's a method of maturity, right? He lists these things. There's multiple things. So this is what happens. So this is what we have to do in these situations. Okay, I got to sit down and think, what does it mean to deny myself when I'm struggling with anger because someone said something politically that I disagree with? What does it mean to deny myself? How do I deny myself when I'm struggling with lust? How do I take up and you give thought to it. You give thought to it. You think about it, right? That's just one method. Now that's a method that requires some more nuance, right? Let me give you another example. Last year, about January, February last year, I just told the Lord, I used to pray, Lord, I'm coming for you. I'm just coming after you. And one day I was reading the Beatitudes, right? Matthew 5, 3 through, 15 or something. I'm reading the Beatitudes. And I realized it just hits me in that moment. It's probably the Holy Spirit. It hits me. These are 9 characteristic traits that the Lord said people who go to heaven. Every one of them is a characteristic trait that God says this is what believers should be like. This is a method of maturity. Here's what I did personally. I started with blessed are those who mourn, because I felt like I didn't mourn over my sin a lot. I'd mourn over the Commanders losing more than my sin. True story. I didn't mourn over my sin. So I said, you know what, Lord? I prayed almost daily for God to help me mourn over my sin. And then I thought about my sin in ways that would be grieving. I didn't just pray it, but I tried to think about my sin in ways that over some time I began to be affected emotionally. And now that is a normal occurrence for me. I'm not saying this to boast. I have many flaws. I'm just trying to show you that what I'm saying is biblical. God has given us methods of maturity to help us in these tumultuous times. The problem is we don't want them. We want moral outcomes. Morality cares about the outcome. I just want to not struggle with this anymore. Holiness cares about the process. What does it mean to be dependent? Let me tell you why God cares about process. Let me prove this to you. In Romans 12, God says this, look, do not be conformed to the image of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, right? That by testing, you may discern the will of God, what is good, acceptable, and perfect. That's process. I got to test it, and then discern. That's process. Many Christians don't want that. I just want to stop feeling the way I feel when I give into sin. So you think, let me block my phone. Let me do this. Let me stop talking to this person. Let me do. No, that's morality. Morality is about outcomes. Jesus said, look, when we believe in Jesus, we're justified, legally justified, right? God has said, you're righteous to me because of Christ. Now learn how to live it. Christianity is about learning how to live by faith the righteous that God declared we have. So I'm learning. There's a process. God cares about the process. He cares about the process. We want the outcome because I don't want to feel this way. I hate feeling bad. That's not what it's about, fam. God has given us methods of maturity. So I went after blessed are those who mourn. Then I said, okay, Lord, I'm going after blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. I prayed that almost every day for months. And then I would do this. I would make decisions. I would think what demonstrates hungering and thirsting for righteousness. So I was like, you know what? I'm not watching that show. I'm not watching that anymore. I'm not doing this. You know what? I'm going to spend time with the Lord right now. When I desire to binge watch a show, I would make decisions that actively demonstrate that I'm hungry. And I was praying and I was crying out. And then because I had prayed about growing in mourning and God answered that prayer, I was crying to the Lord that I didn't hunger and thirst for righteousness enough. If you go to my church, anyone will tell you they've seen a transformation. It's not because of me, but I am taking scripture and using it as a method for maturity. You need it because in this day and age, with all this stuff going on, you're going to lose your mind. You're going to watch people that you thought were godly wow out, and you're going to be like, oh my God. What's the method of your maturity? Let me give you a different example, right? In Ephesians 6, God warns us. He says this, we do not wrestle with flesh and blood, right? But against principalities, authorities, and rulers in the high places, against spiritual forces, evil forces in the heavenly places, right? And then he goes down this tirade about the shield of faith, the helmet of salvation, the breastplate of righteousness, the belt of truth, right? The sword of the Spirit, right? Let me ask you a real question. Say when you struggle with maybe anxiety, right? What's the method of maturity for you to get through anxiety? Many people want therapy, and some Christians want therapy. I'm not saying that's wrong. Want therapy and want medication. I'm not saying that's wrong. That's not a method for maturity. That's a coping mechanism, right? What's the method of maturity? How many times have you said, how many times have you sat down, thought about something that you struggle with, right? And we all have weaknesses. We all have weaknesses. I haven't arrived. I'm not saying that. You can look at me and be like, man, that dude needs to lose weight. Cool, thank you. Going out. We're working on it. But we all have weaknesses. But my point is this. If you can't prove that my weight is connected to me pursuing the Lord or not, because there's a ton of people who know me better than you that would tell you that no, it's not just one thing, right? It's all of it. You're trying to submit everything to the Lord, right? But when's the last time you said, hey, how does the helmet of salvation, how should that help me? Because salvation is the helmet. So I'm thinking, how should I think about my salvation in such a way that I resist bitterness? And you meditate and you pray, Lord, He's given us multiple methods. And a lot of us don't use them. We don't use them. We watch YouTube channels. We want this. We watch that. We don't have a method of maturity. And this is what the Bible gives us, multiple methods. Now, this is a much that I could go through this extensively. I just want to wet your whistle to this reality. There are methods of maturity that God has said are yours. They belong to us. The Spirit will help us. I'll give you one more before I close. Here's the last one. I have this thing that I call the love test. There was a point in my life where I had very predictable, like most of us have very predictable situations. Like maybe for Thanksgiving, maybe you're going to get with some family members who are very challenging to be with. You're not looking forward to it. Not just because their potato salad has raisins in it. That's a whole other sin issue. I'm just saying because it's going to be challenging to be around these people, right? So what you do is you think, okay, here's what I used to do. I knew when I'd pull up to the situation before I went into it, I would say, Lord, what is the action of love that's required of me right now? And I would just go through 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 8. And I'd be like, love is patient, love is kind, it is not rude, it does not boast, it does not insist on its own way. And I would go through and be like, okay, I need to not be rude. Let me not insist on my own way. And let me be kind. And then that's how I would go into the situation and have this in my mind. And I would try to act on it. By the grace of God, there were times I just was able to do it. But then there were times I just failed. I didn't do it. There were times. But there was a method. Now I have, it's called the love test. It's so much a part of how I think. I just know this is a love test. All right, so I'm in Arkansas last week. I'm in a training with a couple other lead pastors in different parts of the country. We're coming together for this cohort, caring for our souls, all this, right? Great time. I get to the airport and I have a connecting flight. So I fly out of Arkansas to St. Louis and to BWI. Right? Baltimore, Washington International. That's the airport I fly out of. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the connecting flight. Southwest gives me these updates and I'm realizing, wait a minute, my flight is running late and it's making my connecting flight going to be difficult. I find out there's weather coming from Dallas, Fort Worth, DFW, that's making the plane leaving there incapable of leaving to get to me in time to get to St. Louis so I can make my connecting flight. Lo and behold, I missed the flight. So they tell me you have two options. You can either spend the night in Louisville, Arkansas, and then fly out tomorrow, fly to St. Louis, and then get your connecting flight to BWI, or you can still fly to St. Louis tonight, spend the night there, and then go to BWI. So I'm thinking about it. I knew this was a love test. And here's the test. Will I complain about God's sovereignty and allowing this to happen? Keep in mind, from the Old Testament to the New, God tests his people. God told the Israelites, I'm doing this to test your heart. 1 Peter 1 tells us God's testing us, right? To make sure that our faith is genuine. I knew this was a love test. I could complain, get offended. I watch people yell at the lady. It's not her fault. What is she, the Lord? She's controlling the weather? No. I started joking with the guy Stan. I met this guy Stan who was sitting over there who was missing his flight. We just laughed and joked and we just talked about it. I was like, cool. I called my friend up and said, hey, bro, I need the help, man. And I said, what? He said, look, I got bit by a midget on my inner thigh. And then we just started laughing. And I just like, nah, seriously. I told him what happened. What should I do? Could you pick me up? He said, I don't know if I can do that. So I said, I don't want to spend the night in this airport. I'm going through all that to say this. I ended up going to St. Louis because I was like, look, I only want to catch one flight home. So I said, if I'm going to stay in the airport, I'm staying in St. Louis. I went there. met someone, we were talking, had a great conversation, but I was up all night, boarded my plane at 4:40. But by the grace of God, I didn't sin because I knew it was a love test. I knew it was a love test. You know why? Because that's a method of maturity that I've sown to. Okay, what's the action of love that's required right now? You need a method of maturity. You need it in this day and age. You need it because that's what's going to help you persevere. And don't choose a method that's out. Use the actual Bible. Do the work. Okay, let me discern what the will of God, what is good, what is acceptable, what is perfect. Anxiety, I did a study. Science agrees with the Bible. Science said that they did a study on people who struggle with anxiety, deep anxiety, not just like I'm just worried about my test, but like really. And they said that they saw in the brain when those people who struggle with anxiety started expressing gratitude and things they were grateful for, that it changed the brain chemistry in their mind. Go look this up if you think I'm lying. Go look this up. It changed the brain chemistry in their minds, and they started to lose their anxiety. Couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. I told this to my church a couple months ago. God's word is real. God said, look, don't be anxious about anything, but with prayer and supplication, make your request known for God. With thanksgiving, make your request known to God. And then he said, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is just, whatever is this, think on these things. Like God, science is affirming what God has said. But ask people who struggle with anxiety, how often do you sit down and just say, okay, let me just thank God right now. Let me just, with thanksgiving, let me just thank God. Let me think about, okay, Lord, what's true right now? What's true? What's true is you're merciful. You've given me things I don't deserve. You go through the list. That's what we do. It's biblical. God has provided a method of maturity, and we just don't use them. So we're running around thinking that we're not growing, that it's not working, and then it's really just because we're doing everything except what God said do. But what do I know? I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just trying to honor the Lord. What do I know? Right? Methods of maturity. This is a much longer video I could make because there's a lot of them, and I would love to walk through them with you. And then you just say, because sometimes you need more than one, you got to figure out. But like methods of maturity. One last one because you asked me because you twisted my arm. Hebrews 5:14, right? Think about this. Let me tell you why I'm saying this. Hebrews 5:12 through 14, right? This is right after it says that that Jesus learned obedience through what he suffered, right? Right after that section, crazy section of scripture, right? Although he was a son, first Hebrews 5:7 through 9, right? He was the son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. And he was heard because of his loud cries and tears, because of his reverence, right? This is what it's saying. And then it drops down to verse 12. And he's like, look, many of you, I'm paraphrasing, this is the Kurt Kennedy, the CKT, the Kurt Kennedy translation. The writer of Hebrews, he says, look, many of you should be teachers of the law right now, but you need someone to teach you the basic principles of the oracles of God. He said, you need milk, not solid food. And then he gives a method. He said, solid food is for the mature. Verses 5:14, Hebrews 5:14. For those who have their powers of discernment trained, method, powers of discernment trained by constant practice to distinguish good from evil. He wasn't saying they distinguish good from evil just about the world, but about their own hearts. Good from evil. I promise you, the Lord is not opposing your growth. He wants you to grow. Sometimes we want to grow for the wrong reasons because we don't want to feel a certain way anymore. We got to say, Lord, I want to grow because I love you and I want to please you. And that's why I'm going after this. But we need to take the methods that God has laid out in the Bible and say, how do I apply this? I'm not talking about praying it once and then waiting for the magic to happen. This isn't Harry Potter. Wink, wink, wink. All of a sudden, ooh. Take the next 3 months. Go pick a beatitude or go pick a particular area of love or go to the Galatians. Do the Galatians test, right? Do the Galatians 5 test. The works of the flesh, the works of the spirit. What fruit of the spirit do you feel like this is what I want to go after? And I'm going to pray every day. And don't just pray. People think, oh, if I just pray, prayer is good and it's necessary. But prayer, like there's a prayer, God help me, but then there's, okay, submit to the act in faith. So if you think, okay, I want to grow in gentleness, say you just want to grow in gentleness, you pray, you're praying, pray that for 3 months. Lord, help me to be gentle. And then think of opportunities to be gentle and act gentle. When you're offended, you take a deep breath. Hey, how are you doing? How can I help you? What do you need? I understand. How can I pray? Whatever it is, right? That's what he gave us. These are weapons for our warfare. How does the belt of truth help you when you gossip a lot? What does the belt of truth say to your gossip? What does the breastplate of righteousness say to your anger? Sit down, think about it, pray. Lord, I promise you, you will be transformed. God is committed to that. The problem is we're just not. We want moral fixes, quick fix. And the Lord's not going to do it because he wants you. He wants your heart. He wants you dependent. You know what Christianity is? It's imitating surrender. We're learning how to imitate Jesus is saying, I do what pleases the Father. That's my desire. Many of us struggle with sin because we don't hate it. You do not hate the sin that crucified the Lord that you said you love. And I've been guilty of that. I've been a pastor for going on 18 years. And I would say largely I would resist sin, but I didn't always hate it. And when I fell into habits and patterns, it was largely because I just don't hate the concept. I didn't hate it. Well, now the Lord is helping me hate sin and love him more. But what do I know? I don't know what I'm talking about. Whatever it is. Like and subscribe or don't. See y'all next video. Peace.